Hey everyone, Cynics here, and I'm back for another artist showcase video. This time I am joined by Ian Galvin,
Hello.
and you may not know who that is. In fact, I don't even know who that is, but I was browsing around on conceptart.org and I noticed a thread that was entitled Jet Moto redesign or something to that effect. And he had some really interesting concept art going on for this little project he's been doing in his free time, redesigning kind of vehicles for the Jet Moto video game of long ago that has since died out. So this caught my eye because I think these personal projects are a great way to kind of, I don't know, both build up your portfolio and to kind of get noticed, and can be a great way to get your foot into the door into the industry as well. I actually recall some like other people that have done similar things, such as Marco Djurdjevic did his little foray into redesigning both X-Men characters, and he also did a series of redesigning He-Man characters. And I think it was those projects that actually got him a job working at Marvel as a cover artist for their work. Can you think of any other kind of people that have done projects similar to that?
I feel like it's not a redesign, but Daniel Simon, I feel like, kind of jumped tracks from automotive to entertainment, and that was always something that kind of inspired me, like just to see that that kind of thing was possible. And the one thing I really like about these personal projects and stating it as such is it gives you this kind of cachet of just like group think for your project. You aren't like throwing out some character that you just designed over the last 3 years, but you're tapping into kind of this community consciousness of like people who enjoyed this, story or this character, and then that kind of gives you a vehicle for your design like influence. So I think having a structure to build on top of is really important. And I just got lucky in that I was not the only one who was into this video game. I've actually gotten some pretty good feedback on it, which was really lucky because, like you said, this has just been kind of a personal thing. I'm a product designer by trade, and I've always been really interested and excited about entertainment design.
And let me just go back to something you touched on, and that is
Yeah,
what
sure.
you do for a living and what your educational background is in the art world.
I've been in Los Angeles for the last 3 years. I came out here for a product design job with Samsung Design cell phones, which is less exciting than you would think, but it's a good company and I learned a lot. I went to school for transportation design initially, and then I realized not really for me when I was there, so I switched over to product design, um, and that's kind of been my focus. I'm hoping with this entertainment stuff, I know a lot of like really great artists that are able to freelance and work off-site on a lot of projects because so much of entertainment design can just be sent over a wire. And I know that's a little bit optimistic on my part, but I want to see if I can do it and still keep my foot in the product design world as well because I'm still really into that kind of stuff. Shoes, motorcycles, like soft goods, like handbags. I think there's still a lot of like really interesting things out there, but I've had this itch for entertainment design for so long, and a guy that I work with, Rich Overcash, he went to this little school called Red Engine. It's this tiny little design school in downtown Los Angeles, and all they do is entertainment design. It's not accredited or anything, and as long as you have an understanding of perspective, it is a great way to learn like a really specific skill set because the only other place you're going to get this kind of stuff is like at an accredited college like Art Center, CCS, College for Creative Studies, where I went. And that's really expensive, and they're great educations, and you need a degree in a lot of this stuff. But if you already have a degree, like I do, but you want to kind of adjust your skill set, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. So I just signed up for one class with John Park, which I think if anybody's watching your videos, I'm sure they've probably run across his stuff on some mech blog because he does mind-blowingly good concept art, robots especially. And I took his advanced mech design class and I was hooked. So I've got a little more time on my hands and I've taken a few more classes there and I'm hoping to use this Jet Moto project to kind of polish my process with all of this.
Speaking of this project, I was kind of curious if you've gotten any other attention so far. I know that shortly after I saw it, it seems like it was also picked up on Kotaku, and they had a little article about your project there. I was wondering, what kind of attention that's brought about for you, and if that's been interesting in any way.
It's been ridiculous, is what it's been. That was the weirdest day for me. I'm starting to notice like kind of recycled trends, like in the way I work. Um, I've been sending my stuff out tons of places, but in entertainment design especially, I feel like if you can just get your stuff out there and you just really concentrate on making it the best you can, and just hope against hope that somebody is going to see it, things will work out. And that's a really not a solid way to go about starting a career, but it's worked for me in the past with my product design stuff. Somebody just saw it in a really weird place. I didn't approach them, and it was the same thing here. I just had this tiny little blog, and I've got my stuff up on Coreflot, which is a popular portfolio website for product design. And I just got an email actually from like the lead creative director on the original Jet Moto game saying, "Hey, just saw your stuff on Kotaku, and I'm real flattered you were doing this. I think it's great, and maybe we can talk sometime." And I read this email at like 8 a.m. on a Wednesday, just bleary-eyed and confused because I see his name and his like job title. It's like, what do you, I have, I don't know what you're talking about. So I went over there and I was just blown away. Like they'd written this, I mean, it wasn't a big article, but they had all my pictures in there and like just like two paragraphs, like with the author just saying, okay, this is interesting. Thought you guys might get a kick out of this. And it just blew up. Like Kotaku, I had no idea how big that site was.
I think that's definitely a great story and hopefully inspirational to people. I kind of always love these stories, like I mentioned, of people who just do these little projects and then all of a sudden they're getting, recognition for their work and things like that. I guess I should have also mentioned that Mr. Jack from the last video, he kind of had the similar story of kind of just like doing this little portfolio of Blizzard fan art, and then all of a sudden Blizzard contacted him and we're offering him a job. So it's just kind of great to see when people have success with these little personal projects they're working on. So you were nice enough to actually record the process of one of these vehicles for this video, so I'm pretty excited about that. So I guess we can jump into the process portion of this video.
Okay, it's going to jump around a little bit here and initially, and you probably saw a little bit of a few renderings and sketches. I have those on a separate layer, and what they are basically is a previous design. One of my ideas for Jet Moto was I want to break it up into two classes. Like in a racing game, like you start off with a small little car, and then you work your way up to like these just really purpose-built like race cars. And so what I wanted to do is have two different levels, Class 1 and Class 2 for Jet Moto. And so one of the things I would get out of that is showing that I can show a design language. So what I've done is I've copied over one of the Class 1 designs, and I'm referencing that as I draw just to get a general feeling of kind of a family. So I'm using similar shapes, similar lines, and similar architecture. In addition to that, I just threw in a little sketch for what I kind of wanted it to look like, and then also another real-world inspirational piece, which is I'm pretty sure it's like the back end of some Russian rocket, because I just wanted this one to feel very fast and kind of being the pilot in this one is kind of pulled behind like some powerful propulsion system. At least that's how the first one felt. It's kind of got this rat rod aesthetic, and so now I have to go in and kind of like push that design forward into the future. So it's like maybe the same company is designing these two vehicles, and it's really a pretty tough test to sit down and accurately imagine like, okay, what's the next step? Because like that's kind of one of those things that when you see like all the BMW 3 Series lined up together over the last 20 years, you look at it and like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But if somebody was to like sit you down and say, okay, draw the next one in that line of like 7 or 8 evolutions, there would be a lot of disagreement about that, and it's always really, really tough to do. And I'm not sure I nailed it exactly, but that's what I had in my head initially.
So I'm just curious about how much of this particular design you had in your head before you started, because it seems like you're jumping straight into kind of like line work without really a thumbnail type base or anything like that. So was it pretty developed in your head, or are you just kind of making up the line work as you go along?
It's a mixture. I don't have a really defined process for that because before I started really taking this seriously, my process was sketching something out and then scanning it in and then drawing over it. But one of the little tests that I've given myself lately is to actually learn to draw with a Wacom tablet in a way that's comparable to my quality of pen sketches. And it's not, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm the best at it, but it's always been something I kind of pride myself in is good line work. And I get really frustrated when I can't do that like in the computer. So one of the ways I've gotten around that is just by just doing it, and I've done a ton of these now. But also you can see what I'm working on now is an overlay. I have a tendency to be a little precious with my work, especially when I'm drawing on paper. And so I take a really long time and I sit there and I contemplate stuff. But I'm trying to break out of that. You can see I'm not really staying in the lines of my original drawing, but I'm trying to keep an open mind about, this is my original idea, but if I stumble onto something better, I really don't want to steamroll it just to stay true to my original design. But, alternately, you don't want to spend too much time on anything. And even in Photoshop with Control Z, I think that just opens up another problem where people don't commit, and that's definitely something I need to work on still. Because if you realize that you can just redo something if you don't like it, I mean, what's to stop you from ever putting down that final line?
I think that when it comes to Control Z, I kind of like it just because it makes me feel like my artistic vision is more of like a critique type thing where I can just judge stuff based on, what it looks like after I've made it and keep doing it until I've made it, rather than a more mechanical side of things where I am trying to like get something right away, and knowing what
Mhm.
I need it to be right at the start.
Right, right. And this one worked a little bit better with the line drawing because I did have reference for it, so I did have a pseudo direction for what I wanted to do. But for a lot of these, the initial idea, I do basically the same thing where I lay down some construction lines, and you can see them popped up here, just because I need that for reference when I do complex things like those front forks. But I'll lay down some construction lines just so in my head I can see perspective. And I think that demystifies what a lot of people have a hard time with perspective, and you can see I'm still not happy with that wing, but having those perspective lines just kind of puts a grid in your head. It's almost like turning the world into kind of like a Tron world, and you can see whether things are going to line up or not. And throughout this rendering, I reference that because it is kind of a complex form, and I don't get things right on the first or second, and even the third try sometimes. But sorry, to get back to what I was saying, I did line work on this one because I had a general idea, but for the initial one, I'll just block out shapes until I find something I'm happy with. And that's actually been pretty successful because I can go quickly with it.
So would you say that your background as a product designer kind of influences your work process as kind of a more, entertainment or just kind of like a loose-based artist?
Oh, definitely. I feel like many entertainment people kind of come from an illustration background because, like, initially in like high school and as kids, like no one says the word concept art to you. I mean, I was putting down architect on all of my like Scantron forms all through high school about what I wanted to do later in life. All I knew was I'd like to draw. The options were kind of limited, but I got into product design, and I'm positive that that has influenced how I work because I try to create a process that's useful across multiple fields, and I'm actually pleased to see that a lot of the things I do, like small thumbnails and just quick little call outs about how something would work, leads to a better final product than if I was to just sit down for, like, let's say a spaceship or something and just start sketching because I really think that you need that general hook. Like this one, those air tanks or fuel tanks on the side were really something I had in my head, like stuck, and that's really the only part of the design that I knew I wanted because I think it gives it a nice kind of contrast because it's got all these kind of curving angular shapes, and it's just a nice little offset that maybe somebody would remember. So I think bringing like an iconic look to design is probably the best thing about having that product design background, because you really need to focus on that one aspect that will bring your design into the fore when other designs might not get the same impact.
So it looks like you're pretty much just focusing on like a lighting value study at this point.
Yeah, I break it up into my lighting into two different directions. Initially, I just give it a 1, 2, 3 run with just a simple light from above, just because I feel like in 99 out of 100 situations, there's going to be a general light source. And if it was for an environment, obviously you need to light it as such, but it's usually good for me to do it this way because I force myself to just, like I said before, commit to what's facing up, what's facing down, and I get that first kind of impact into the design. Um, After I've got that 1, 2, 3 down, I go in and I do cast shadows, and I usually use a softer brush for that because I like going back in and you can see erasing away the top of that, and it gives you just a really nice contrast between the shadow where it starts and then kind of where it bleeds away. If you do that the right way, you can actually get to look like a 3D design, which I always think is really cool when people know how to light things correctly.
Yeah, I definitely like the effect of when like a design like this just has those values kind of working for it, and all of a sudden it really pops as a 3D shape.
Hmm. Hmm. One of my favorite concept artists that I've always looked up to for this stuff is Kemp Remillard. He does some of the coolest like mechs and like tanks, like just in his I can see that he works off of 3D design sometimes, but you can see that his like knowledge of what a 3D like rendered object looks like influences the way he sketches, because just his sketches are so nicely lit and they're just grayscale. And if you do that, it just saves you so much time later, which you'll see when you bring in colors and decals. It's just that base is just so important, and it's something that I'm still really focusing on.
So, do you have any experience doing 3D work?
Yeah, actually, I've when I was working at Samsung, we were lucky enough to be involved in every aspect of the design process. So what I did there was cell phones and tablets, and so we would go in, we'd sketch out concepts, and then we would actually build it in 3D using something called Unigraphics NX, which is kind of a mix between solid modeling and surface modeling. And then we would work with the engineers to talk about feasibility, which gets really tedious and it's really boring. But the nice thing is it's given me this attention to detail that I don't think I had before. And for that reason alone, I'm really thankful for it, because I think I have a tendency to get lazy with some things. Like when I get to a point where I'm like, I think it looks pretty cool. It's kind of given me this ability to step outside myself a little bit and be a little more honest with myself, which I think is a really tough thing to learn. And you can see that, like, I'm later in the design that I get all the way to the end, and I wasn't initially happy with the shadow that I put down, but it's part of it's just because I had been working on this design, and in my head it was done. You know, I know what the shadow should look like, so I just threw something down, and that's the kind of thing that you later, because I ended up going back in um, after a few people, gave me some input for that kind of thing, and it's important to never be satisfied, I guess I would say, with that kind of thing. So what I'm doing right now, after I get my shadows kind of blocked in, I pick a focal point, and that's where I was going in and cleaning up those areas. And after I get that to a degree I'm happy with, it's by no means finished. I bring in color, and one of the reasons I do that is because I am really bad with color, and I always use reference. And you can see that's what I've done here. One of the things I wanted to do in Jet Moto is make it look really, race oriented. The thing about race cars is they're, oversaturated and really in your face, which actually kind of hides a lot of my shortcomings when it comes to color. So I can pick really saturated blues and bright colors, and nobody's gonna, fault me for it. So that's what I've done here. It's pretty easy to add color. What I do is my whole design is kind of masked off on its own thing. So I always just, you can see me collapsing layers. I think you do that just by doing Alt and then clicking in between them. And the nice thing about that is you only have to paint inside the lines once. So once I have my general design kind of laid out, then I'll just go in and splash color on there just try to figure out like a nice layout for a paint scheme because I don't want it to take away from the design, and I just want to kind of push forward like the aspects of it that I really like, which are these shapes up front and kind of all of the vents I decided on should be highlighted with that yellow. And the yellow and blue I think works together because it works on that race car, so why wouldn't it work on a spaceship? And again, that's one of those things that I feel like maybe my product design background gives me because I follow these like racing teams, and I don't know if that's generally like I don't really watch sports or anything, but I feel like it gives this degree of believability if you use like a sponsor's uh, paint scheme because even if you don't follow sports, like maybe you saw a commercial when you were watching TV and this race car went by, and it it's close to what you saw. It's another one of those weird little hooks that I'm hoping will draw people in more so than if it was just like another spaceship that was just painted on. Because I mean, how many spaceships have like racing numbers and stuff on them? So
That was definitely the thing that I really enjoyed about seeing your initial Jet Moto designs was just how much character they had and how much they felt like an evolution of, like race cars we see today, where it's very relatable in that fashion and it doesn't feel like something, mysterious. It has that edge of the familiar, which is always great when you could bring it into such a futuristic and strange design.
And to go along with that, I heard a really good number thrown out there for like I was saying before, I have a hard time designing things that belong in the future, and kind of a general ratio that I've heard that I think works with just about anything is if you do like 60% relatable stuff, like that last 30%, you can go really crazy and still not, get in the weeds of people like asking, which side is the front, which I really don't like to hear.
Yeah. So what are you doing right here?
So after I get the color in, it was just a first pass, and I was letting the shadows show. But doing that makes those colors look like the same material as the gray, and I want the colored parts to be like really shiny and poppy, like somebody painted this like dark gray metal. So what I've done is you can see in my little color picking area, I've given myself a bright, a mid, and a dark tone. And what I'll do is I'll go in and use a soft brush because a soft brush will give you the um, kind of the roll off that glossy surfaces have. And again, you just go in with a soft brush, touch it up, and then erase away with a hard brush. And that hard line and soft line together create this contrast that, for whatever reason, I see as being a shiny object. Even if you don't do it like perfectly, for whatever reason, we're just so trained to seeing like a chrome object rendered with soft, soft highlights on one side and solid ones on the other that it's just going to work 90% of the time. A good reference for that is like Sid Mead stuff. If you just pull up one of his paintings, if you're ever having trouble with like chrome objects, I mean, you're done. I mean, his is a little stylized, and you can get caught trying to copy his style and not copy his intent. But just in general, for entertainment, he does some of the best shiny objects. So what I'm doing now is, again, I remember doing this part and feeling like it was a little cartoony. So I'm making my darks a little darker and my lights a little clearer because I think it needs a little more realism added to it. Because with my style, I think it looks a little animation-y. It can look a little like cel-shaded, and I'm trying to move away from that for these. So what I'm going to do now is go in and add some details which will make it appear a little more functional and a little more purposeful, which is always something really important for me when, that's the point of the design is these are made to go fast and I need to get that across. These aren't like little toys that are, for sale in Toys R Us or something.
Yeah, so it looks like you're getting into a bit more of the like paneling and detail stuff. And is there like a lot you learned about that in your kind of product design stuff, or is it more like a function of knowing how these things are normally constructed that kind of brings about knowing where to put like panels and things like that?
I'd say it's like 50-50. Like my product design eye more so tells me when something looks stupid rather than when it should look. Like when I see entertainment design and like the panels for a spaceship are all perfectly squared, like I feel like it's the product design side that like gets annoyed by that. So it's hard to do paneling function unless you can see it on some of my other designs. I think pretty well. The white one for some reason. I was really happy with how I broke up the panels for the canopy because after I realized how I wanted to open, that kind of informed how I cut it up. On this one, I don't go into that amount of detail, but the reference I always use for like really good paneling is aircraft. Because the way those come together, if you just use that as reference, you would be amazed how easy it is to kind of get in this flow of like putting these certain angles down instead of just squares. Um, and the other nice thing about paneling that I definitely got from the product design side is that you should use it as a chance to show what would you call it? Like the way the surface is bending. You can see it
The
on
form.
those. Yeah, yeah, exactly. On the forks, I was having a really hard time getting those to read right, and I didn't want to spend too much time rendering up like the surfaces because I really want the eye to focus near the cockpit and those two canisters. And a nice way to kind of cheat and do it quick is just by doing some quick paneling because it's not too distracting and it allows you to show symmetry and it allows you to show form in a really cheap way.
Yeah, that was definitely something I picked up on from a long time ago, from hearing Feng Zhu talk about. Just like using paneling as your one of your main ways to show the form of an object. If you just have like a silhouette, you can quickly just do like a line down where you want the middle of the object to be, and all of a sudden you've suddenly like created a form out of this thing that was just like a black splotch.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point because he's probably one of the best. And you can see that tail was getting really boring, so that's the one place I put like more interesting paneling. And I really just had it follow the form of that vent in front of it because the only thing worse than I guess square paneling is paneling that doesn't make sense. Like I wouldn't just punch a bunch of circles into the side without a reason. So I think that's why I did it right there. Another thing you can see me doing a lot is, especially with the paneling, is flipping my canvas because my hand, as I'm sure just about everybody's, works in a certain direction. And I have CS5 now, and I heard that you can rotate the canvas by a certain number of degrees, but for me, just flipping it upside down or left to right is more than enough. And my computer's fast enough now that it doesn't lag, which is what bugged me before, but it saves so much time trying to get a line just right if you can flip your canvas into a way that's more comfortable for you. And I do that all the time. Additionally, you save yourself a lot of time checking perspective because you would be really surprised how many things you miss in one perspective. And then you flip it and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that ever looked okay to me.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of putting in some of the final details. Before I put on decals or anything like that, I want them to be more finished. And the front end was just feeling a little empty compared with how much time I spent on the rest of it. So I don't know. I was thinking on the front of this, it's kind of like some kind of magnetic charge that's pulling it through the atmosphere. Um, but I also still wanted those like engine kind of inspirations. So you can see those little holes on the top that look like air intakes from like old hot rods. And it's a really subtle thing, but I'm hoping it kind of reads. I think one of the last things, you just saw that menu pop up real quick. One of my all-time favorite tools for Photoshop is Sharpen. And if you just go to, gosh, filters and then sharpen, unsharpen, and unsharpen mask, it takes your whole rendering and just kind of tightens every line up. Anything that was like a few pixels and it was a little fuzzy, they'll just tighten it right up. And that has saved so many of my drawings. And I can't overemphasize how nice it is to use that tool to really direct like the viewer's eye to where you want to go.
So this definitely seems like one of the more fun and amusing kind of parts of the rendering process is where you're adding all these little logos and kind of real world companies and
Yeah, this
stuff like
is
that.
this is great, and I sometimes get annoyed with myself that it's taking so long because I do just want to get to these places. You can see that I've already got these folders up here, and I didn't just do this for the rendering. This is actually how I work. Every time I find cool decals, I have a little folder that I use that I just put decals logos into, and that's it. It saves me so much time because you just pick things that are appropriate. Like one of the logo groups that I'm using here is like. What would you call it, like Silicon Valley companies, which just makes sense. So like if
Yeah.
this like really futuristic racing league is like getting funding, I mean it's getting funding from IBM and Google. Some of my initial designs also had those little like scanner codes that you can like check out with your cell phone. I wish I had kind of brought that into some other ones because I think that's a really like kind of novel thing to bring in. It's just like grabbing something out of popular culture that's just on the cusp of coming out because anything you work on, if you're going to show it to somebody else, that no one's going to see it for weeks, if not months. So if you can take the time to do something that's going to be relevant in a few weeks and not just immediately right now, I think people appreciate that. This is me not being happy with the quality of one of my logos, so I'll just go into Google and grab a new one. And I would say that this is really important that this is a personal project I'm using this stuff. If I was working in a company, I would be really hesitant to do what I'm doing,
Oh
which
yeah,
is just
definitely.
grabbing general logos. So with all of this stuff, like every time I show somebody it, like I'm very clear this is a personal project, and I haven't gotten the okay from anybody, but I think it falls into the category of being okay because I'm not trying to get any profit from it, and I'm not saying that it's mine. So that's a really nebulous area, and I would be really hesitant to give anybody, real advice on that. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it. And if anybody else wants to do something similar, you have to take the consequences with the glory that comes along with that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing to note that anytime you're using these, other kind of established designs and things that you really need to make sure it's for, personal projects and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the panel, I just pulled all of these little white ones off of. What I tried to do with all of my logos is give it kind of a first read, second read. So they all have a primary sponsor, which is kind of near the back on most of them. And then I have these secondary ones, which are just like basically all just race car and motorcycle sponsors. Somebody was nice enough to collect them all in one area. And if you just type in race car decals, you'll find something similar. So what I do is I just go in and grab some that are all kind of similarly sized, and then I give them all the same color, depending on what my color scheme needs. And then I just kind of pop them down there. And it's really, really easy to do. And you don't need to get the perspective right to get it to read correctly.
While I've mentioned some stuff about like the different programs before, Photoshop is definitely far superior at doing this kind of quick resizing and like sampling of like logos and stuff like that. You can't really do it in Painter that easily. Just wanted to note that for people. But have you had any experience working with other programs, or you're pretty happy
No,
with Photoshop?
yeah, I am, and there are still a few things that I see with Painter, I guess, paintings that I don't know how they did it, and I would really like a chance in the future to at least get, my toe in the water with that stuff. But Photoshop has really given me everything I need. I'm doing the last of the decals now. One of the things is they all need to read is a similar family. So you can see I pulled one of my old ones out just to reference a color for my wing front areas. I guess you could say that's one of the things I pulled out of the product design world is like just finding maybe the reference that somebody else wouldn't see. So that weird greenish color on the front leading edge of the wing on this design is the exact same color that like a lot of JGTC, which is a Japanese touring car, vehicles have. And for whatever reason, I don't know why they do it, but they paint all of their carbon fiber the same weird green color. And it's just another one of those weird little hooks that I'm trying to get across that maybe you would never notice, but it's there and it affects you.
So is there any significance with these names you put in on the?
Yeah, they're all famous racers. That was another
Okay.
little Easter egg that I kind of put down. Like some of them are rally car drivers, the others are like famous MotoGP racers. This is Jorge Lorenzo's, and all of the flags are correct. Actually, that Kotaku article, a bunch of people noticed that Guy Martin, who's one of my all-time favorite motorcycle racers, was the pilot of one of the red designs I did. And a few people noticed that, which I was really surprised by. But it's just I feel silly making up a name. It's just like I don't know, I have a hard time with that stuff. So it's another one of those things that if you're being respectful, I guess I don't see any problem with kind of picking and choosing somebody's name who somebody else might notice. And then I really like these caution things because it adds function. Like caution signs and caution decals really give you an idea that like this thing gets hot or this thing moves in a way that could be surprising to somebody. And the last thing it does is it gives you kind of a sense of scale. This vehicle is supposed to be pretty big. You sit inside it like a normal motorcycle, but it's much, much bigger. I'd say it's like probably two car lengths long. And after I have all of my decals down, one of the things that a friend of mine, Court Newman, he's another designer that I have the pleasure of working with, has always really pushed on me, is texture. Uh, Initially, all of my renderings he was looking at, he's like, this looks like a computer did it, and that's really not something I want. It's okay if it looks like a computer did it, if that's what I wanted to do, but it wasn't my intention. So that was something I needed to work on. So a big thing that I've done in all of these is bring in textures. This is another folder that I have and I'm always adding to that really can elevate your design from, I would say, an amateur to something that looks more professional. And not to say that I'm there yet, but it's something I've been told from multiple sources. So it's really something I'm trying to concentrate on. And you don't have to be that particular about it. You can see I just, because the pattern was too small, and rather than size it up because I would look weird, I'm just taking the clone brush and just kind of going in. And you can see how sloppy this one is. I'm not real happy with it actually looking at it now. But it just gives kind of like a grit to a digital painting that you wouldn't normally get. And it's one of those things that gets um, kind of pushed into the background of a successful painting because no one looks at like a Sparth painting and says, wow, he's got really good textures. It's about the emotion that's there, but I guarantee you would feel differently about it if it didn't have any textures. And I don't know how he puts them in there, but I wish I did because they're really subtle and they help with the story. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. The one I just put on has a directional pattern to the metal, and the only thing I did was I put the direction in the perspective that the vehicle's going. So um, I think you can see it more on the finished one than you can in this video, but it really gives it this weird little twinkle that a lot of digital stuff doesn't have.
Yeah, what you said about Sparth is definitely true and interesting. Because a lot of times we're trying to like break away from things looking too digital or too clean or too perfect because that just makes things kind of lack that personality and that energy that we really need to capture in art in order to get people's attention and get people to have a strong attachment to something. And I think Sparth actually mainly gets his textures from all the crazy kind of brushes he uses, which
Hmm.
are generally all really strongly based on textures. And I don't think he really even uses any brushes that are just like simple flat brushes.
Yeah, and I do. I only use about 3 brushes, so that's where I need to get my textures from. And this is the point when I got really tired, and you can see that like this doesn't make any sense. I cleaned up the shadow in the final one, and I actually touched up a few other things, but
Yeah,
um,
this was definitely like a thing that I saw originally when you were kind of completing the image that you showed me, and I was like, I don't know why you're like making the shadow all grainy around the edge, and like it didn't really make sense to me, but
no, like looking at it now, I have no idea. It's just one of those things. It's like you need to like it. This is a really good this is a really good example of what one of the things I'm trying to work on is realizing that there's always something else you can do better. And for me right now, it's finishing that last 5%.
so did you work on this all in one sitting?
I did. I don't normally do that, but I was just really motivated to. I usually do it in two settings, and I get probably 70% of it out of the way, at least visually the first time around, and then I'll do something else because that last 30% you really have to have your eyes open.
Yeah, definitely. I found that more often, especially when I'm recording stuff, because I used to always do it in one sitting. But I would find that I'd always be kind of messing things up at the end or like changing stuff because you just kind of get tired of it, or
Hmm.
you're just kind of, your brain's not really focused on the whole big picture. So I've definitely started doing that in my even in recordings to record, make sure I record in like two different times just so I get my eyes, recalibrated and freshly looking at the big picture of an image.
Hmm. Well, if I ever have the honor of doing another one of these, that's definitely something I'm gonna keep in mind for the next time because I was bleary eyed. I was sweating a little more than I should have been, and I'm just gonna save myself a lot of trouble. So
So
I think that's about it.
yeah, luckily we have the final image here, so we can, look at that and see the changes you made to the shadow and everything like that.
Yeah, and if there's anything that's not clear, because looking at the final image now, I know that there are a few things that maybe I glossed over. And if anyone wants to contact me, if they have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Oh yeah, and that's a good thing I should bring up is maybe you can tell us where your blog is and stuff like that in case people want to see more of your work and get in contact with you.
Yeah, definitely. It's just it's my name, Ian Galvin, at blogs or dot blogspot, excuse me, dot blogspot.com. That's a collection of personal work, product design, and entertainment design. Right now, it's mostly entertainment, but that would be the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah. I loved that image you had of just like doing sketches of different like gears and kind of functional stuff. I don't know,
Oh,
that always
thanks.
speaks to me. Like I love seeing stuff like that.
That's a really important sketch that I put up there because like that's when I realized that it's not so much giving it a function as giving it the appearance of a function, and you can't do that without having an actual function in mind. But I think knowing that takes a lot of pressure off somebody to make it look functional if you just realize that it just needs to kind of tell a story and you don't have to actually build it. At least for me anyway, that takes a lot of pressure off my shoulders because I start to clam up if I know that it has to like be built. I start all these different ideas come into my head about how you can't do this and you can't do that. But as long as you make it look like it works, that's gonna sell it 90% of the time.
Well, Ian, I'd like to thank you for coming on and actually sharing your process with us. And it's been a lot of fun. So I hope you have some good success in going forward with this project. And hopefully you get to do everything you would like to do in the art industry.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And seriously, the pleasure is all mine. I've been watching your videos for a while now, and it's a great honor to actually be a part of one of these.
I guess that's about everything. So if you have any closing words for the young artists out there or anything like that.
I would just say do what you care about. It's at the end of the day, that's you're going to hear from anybody, and that's all that's important is just finding something that you can get lost in, and you look up, and it's 8 hours later than when you started, regardless of what it is, illustration, entertainment, product design. You just have to care because at the end of the day, that's going to show or not show in your work.